everybody. Welcome to today's coffee chat. I'm just going to run through some of the guidelines for the meeting quickly. So if you could please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation, should you have one, that would be great. Feel free to mute and unmute yourself during the participation and during the meeting. Just please try to be respectful of talking over people. You can use the raise hand function to request to speak. You can find this either on the bottom toolbar of your screen, under the participants window, or under the reactions window, depending on which version of Zoom that you're using. If you're calling in today, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can get in touch with me, Matt Archer, via the chat box at marcher@ctps.org or by calling me at 857-702-3708. And with that, Sandy, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thank you, Matt. And again, good morning and welcome to everyone. So I'm just going to do a brief round of introductions. I think many of us probably know each other, but we're going to do name, pronouns if you want, your role, and your municipality, agency, or organization that you're representing this morning. And again, you are free to mute and unmute yourselves. So I'm just going to start, and then I'll go around my screen calling on people as they appear on my list. So my name is Sandy Johnston. I'm a transportation planner with the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. And one of the roles that I fill there is managing the MPO's Transit Working Group, which is sponsoring this series of coffee chats. So let's go next to Alistair.
Alistair Sewers, he, him, his, MBTA head of rail transformation, and here mostly to listen, but we did have a couple of questions, a small slide of sort of introductory questions that were built on the discussion we had back in the spring, I think it was. Nice to meet you all.
All right, thank you, Alistair. And Matt?
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Archer. I'm also a transportation planner with the Boston Region MPO.
All right. Jonathan Belcher?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Belcher, also a transportation planner at the Boston Region MPO.
All right. Judy?
Hi, everybody. Judy Shanley, she, her. I'm the Eastern Seals Director of the National Center for Mobility Management and FTA-funded National Center, and I'm the liaison to FTA Region 1, and I just recently moved back to Boston, so happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, and Judy's been coming to all of our events, so welcome back to Boston.
Trying to learn.
Franny.
Hi, I'm Franny Osman, and I'm a amateur but long, busy transportation advocate from Acton, Mass, on various regional committees and town also. She, her. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Franny. Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm the Senior Shuttle Services Manager with the 128 Business Council of TMA operating shuttles in the Route 128 West area, including out of the Waltham commuter rail station.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Susan.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Susan Barrett, she, her, and I am the Transportation Manager for the town of Lexington. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Susan. Caroline.
Hi, everyone. Caroline Vaness. I'm the manager of transit planning in MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning, and I'm also leading the MBTA's bus network redesign.
All right, great to have you here. Felicia.
I'm Felicia Webb, the administrator with the Cape Ann Transportation Authority.
All right, welcome. I have two people named Jonathan Church here, but I can see that one of them is actually Annette. So Annette, would you like to introduce yourself and rename yourself?
Sure, sorry about that. I couldn't find the link. So I asked Jonathan to forward it to me. Anyway, my name is Annette Dempshire, she, her, hers, and I am the Director of Policy Planning at CTPS.
Great. And Jonathan.
Good morning, I'm Jonathan Church. I'm the Manager of MPO Activities at CTPS and look forward to a great chat today.
All right. And I think Paul Kristner.
Good morning, Paul Kristner, Manager of the Transit Analysis and Planning Group at CTPS.
All right, and hopefully some other folks will trickle in. But did I miss anybody? All right. So Alistair, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about what you're looking for. I know you've got a couple of slides there, and you can tell us to advance it when you want us to.
Get to the basics of unmuting as well. So next slide, please. So just wanted to touch in, as I say, I think it was back in May time, but anyway, could be wrong. We had an outreach and we were discussing new schedules at that point. But at that point, I made a commitment to come back a few times more and continue the conversation. And here are some of the topics we were talking about. One of which, or at least a group of which, are around potential improvements to our stations, whether those are immediately within MBTA commuter rail area or whether they're in the immediate vicinity to facilitate transfers. So it's a pretty broad topic, but I'm trying to get together a list of needs and also both sort of actual sort of physical examples you can give me, and actually go to the next slide. So looking at actual physical needs, so that'll be drop off or immediate road access. Of course, that would require partnering with municipalities or some of it's MassDOT, but potentially MassDOT. And then there will be other potential improvements within our station area, like signage, displays, and other forms of perhaps fare integration, but maybe just informational integration that we could use to just make the whole process a lot easier. And that kind of came out of an effort we've been trying to put together to make our system easier to use for first-time users, because I think we suffer a lot for being focused on, in a very Boston kind of way, on people who've been here for a very long time, exactly where to stand on the station, which carriages are going to open, which direction the train's going to go, all that good stuff. But with the new regional service, we're looking at more casual riders, leisure riders, welcoming new people to different kinds of services, looking at shorter, intermediate journeys. So we're trying to look at it in a very fresh way, and reverse commute and stuff like that too. So all of that is very different, and a lot of our aspects of our stations aren't kind of set up for that. So we're soliciting ideas. There is in very early stages the potential for some funding for some of this, but it's all going to be very small. So we're really looking for just practical, just common sense ideas, and then areas where we could perhaps do a match with the city or leverage some TOD and perhaps get a mitigation. Now I know those are kind of unicorns, but if we can get one of those, that would be very nice. So that's what we're looking for. And yeah, I just wanted to open up that discussion. I think I'd like to sort of start with the first question, which is just make it personal to each of you for your service areas and your particular, station interfaces, what your experience has been and what the key issues are. And I know you're not necessarily the operational people, but just what you've been hearing from users and what the key problems have been so far. And then we can start talking about what we might want to do and what the type of improvements we could make. That's it. I mean, it's a pretty open topic. I'm here to listen. And so is Caroline.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. And I just want to clarify one other thing that I forgot to mention before, which is that we are recording the meeting for internal purposes only. We're not going to make this recording public on our YouTube channel like we do for many of our events. We may present a summary of kind of like a bullet point summary of what we hear to the transit working group at some point, but this is intended to be a space for you to share honestly and confidentially. So if you have something that you don't want us to report, feel free to preface it with that, and we will keep it quiet. Yeah, Susan.
I feel a little awkward being the first person to raise my hand since we have no rail in Lexington. But what I can tell you is that so many people want to connect to rail. And we keep getting asked about, well, can't we get to places other than Alewife, which right now that's where our MBTA buses go, and also our TMA shuttle. And of course, the challenges with connecting to the rail right now is it's very infrequent. So I'm very excited about the fact that about regional rail and the opportunities that it can open up. So I'm excited about that. What I will say is from my limited interaction and trying to look for extensions, at one point when we were redoing, we have a small little community public bus service called Express. And when we were looking to see, was it a possibility to connect to rail, one of the challenges was like, even if we did use our resources in that way, making sure that there was that spot that we could lay over, especially when it's infrequent and you've got to make sure you can make those connections. You need that time there. So that was one thing. I love what you're saying about making sure we have the education for people, and certainly getting to the rail station even accessible, like actually down to the train itself. But then there's this other thing, and I'm curious if other people have had this issue, and maybe it's just for such small time players, but when we were trying to gain access to the Arlington Heights busway, which we finally were granted, and people warned us in advance, it's a long process, that it would take us like 3 months for approvals. It took over a year. So I'm wondering, since you are going to have people who want to partner with you and get people to this service, I think if there's a way the T could look at streamlining that process of approvals for anyone that's using your facilities, I think that would be great. Like, I think really look at the towns or the transportation providers as partners that are going to bring people to your services. Thank you.
Yeah, how should I put it? I acknowledge that we've had a lot of historical issues. That's part of the reason why I'm here. And just trying to find these sources of friction. I certainly didn't know about that one. Obviously not as familiar about the bus approval side of the house, but I will take that over, and yeah, I'll certainly take it to them, because we want to make it as seamless as we can, and that's certainly not making it seamless. So apologies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add on to that a question of my own in terms of the internal functioning of the MBTA, which is who owns that infrastructure, either at rail stations, commuter rail, at ALY subway station, at the busways. If somebody wants to talk about it, do they come to you as kind of the Caroline or Alice, or as the people who are doing the planning for the that mode, or is there a real estate division that they need to talk to?
The sad truth is, it depends. So it depends on the location, as you might imagine. So my recommendation is to come to us, and we'll help you navigate. And there are a lot of moving parts to some of these, because as you can tell, some of it's subway side of the house, some of it's would be, I prefer to say regional rail side of the house, but it is still branded commuter rail. Yeah, and it also depends what's happening in terms of construction at that point, and who's kind of overseeing it as well. And some, as many of you know, because you're linked to a lot of municipalities, some of the lots and drop-off points are actually town-owned too. So again, we can partner and we can obviously influence, but we can't necessarily guarantee a result. But that's what I'm trying to bring together. I don't know, Caroline, did you want to add anything? Yeah.
No, I think that was perfectly said, is that it depends. And there's no clear-cut answer, unfortunately. But Alistair and I are like more than happy to help make the right kind of connections for that.
And I hope we're demonstrating that by being here as well. And I see Jeff's got, I think Jeff's got his hand up too.
Go for it, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, Alistair, Caroline, yeah, let me start off by saying thank you, for being willing to help make those connections, even when it's outside of, your direct purview or your area. I think especially as you get to the smaller organizations, the smaller and smaller ones, I mean, we manage our shuttle fleet with, day-to-day operations and planning is about 3 to 4 people, including down to customer service and contractor management. So, sometimes it's hard for us to keep up to date with, who's in charge of what on the MBTA end. So we appreciate that first off. We currently only have the one rail connection at Waltham, and still in this not quite clear when the pandemic's really winding down phase. That shuttle is still sort of running it very quietly compared to what it used to be. We're not really sure that I don't think there's really many people that are using the commuter rail to shuttle connection, but it's been running for 20 years, so it will come back. That folks will start using that again at some point. For an existing station like that, I think there's definitely some limits to what anyone who's connected with the MBTA and MassDOT can do. It's a more urban station than a lot of the regional rail stations that outlying from Boston. So we're stopping on the street. We have to work with the city. We do have our relationship with the city, so that it's we don't really have big issues other than just the spread out geography of that particular station. But I think the fact that you all are here having these conversations on a regular basis with us bodes well for moving forward into new stations, redesigned, rebuilt, restructured stations, and making sure that space is included for TMAs, for municipal services, for RTAs, that's designed in from the beginning when new or major work is done. I feel like I definitely don't want to make this conversation about Alewife. It's a spot that those of us at the Business Council deal with on an almost daily basis, and I know it's not regional rail, but I think some of the in parallel to what Susan mentioned, some of those challenges at Alewife, it does become that perfect example. We always feel like we're sort of in a no man's land between subway ops, bus ops, real estate and revenue, with the parking garage operations, and and we're all doing it in a facility that was designed in the 1980s. So it wasn't designed with the concept that there would be multiple private, let's just call them organizations, ranging from public TMAs to private TMA services to private corporate shuttles, et cetera, even up to the academy long distance buses that are in there. And it's shoehorning a lot of unexpected uses into a design that is not set and remotely set up to accommodate any of them. So again, don't want to make it about Alewife, but I think that's like an example of some of the challenges that the small operators face, that just sort of getting lost in the shuffle, and we feel like we can sometimes spend months, if not years, going around in circles trying to find a solution to improve operations in there. So these kind of conversations are great to have, and I think we can probably see that there's a need to eventually expand this, not just regional rail, but also and anywhere there's an interface between MBTA services and other carriers, so that Susan is maybe able to get a faster response than a year for for a busway facility.
Yeah, no, noted. And Alewife, as you say, is a special case, but it does prove the rule on some of the functionality and trying to find funding to improve it. And on our organizational side, yes, clearly the interface issues are not good between our bus, our real estate, and our subway side of the house. And even there, subway is split, as you may know. So there are some issues there too. But other than that, I think funding obviously is an issue there, and I think there is a major project behind that. I would say that another hopefully better example, it's way out there, but is South Attleborough. So that would be an example of where the design was, actually it's been revised twice now, I think. Unfortunately, the costs now go way up as a result, but there we're looking at multiple drop-offs. I think one of the drop-offs has actually been phased out of the design for cost-saving purposes, but I think we all agreed that it needed to go back in, and that wasn't the area to be cutting costs. So that was to mix both local bus service and then allow for shuttles as well. So we're hopefully still prioritizing that within new designs, but as you know, the pace of station construction has slowed because of all the funding constraints. So, yeah, anyway, but that is definitely in there, and it's certainly in the mix for all the stations that we're trying to rebuild. I'm kind of trying to look for the lower cost options of stations that you might be choosing to include in your future service, especially where we could do something that, you know, like restriping a parking lot or something, to actually add a little small drop-off area without losing too much of our revenue. But at the moment, we can do that. Or perhaps, you know, doing a deal with a town lot. So that would be the other option. So do see Felicia's got her hand up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Out of the questions that we have right now, the drop-off bus layover at Gloucester, Rockport, and Ipswich, those are all fine. West Gloucester is a little different simply because it is a smaller parking lot and there's one way in and out. We normally don't go in there. We're going in now, but for a different reason.
Sure. And thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. We're happy to do it. I think what CADA would like is to somehow better integrate CADA information with MBTA and MBTA with CADA. We had 2 pilots running. We have a little commuter bus that we started in January, and we have a little on-demand service. And we were able to actually have those on the T-Alert page for our services so that people could see them. And that was really nice, and it advertised it to a different audience than the normal CADA bus people. But if we could somehow work on better integrating ourselves just with information to the customers, that's what CADA would like to do somehow.
Yes, so I'm looking, we're working on a few ideas on that. So we're trying to improve the on-train information. That's one thing. We're very conscious that we don't even actually have a system map. But the minute you have a system map, that allows for both you know, physical on the train, but also perhaps we've been using it quite a bit already, you know, something linked to apps, or at least just direct link to websites to help keep it fresh and up to date. But also to include all the sort of relevant information at each of the stations. And that was part of this effort for first-time riders to understand. And obviously that first-time riders could be going in either direction. And the point is, right, outward bound, it would be to give the full set of information to a rider on the train about what they had experienced when they reached Gloucester, Rockport, or, you know, once it's finally open, or for the moment, West Gloucester. And then that would be the ideal venue for that piece of information. But we're also trying to make it more fun and innovative. And we're trying to work on some perhaps videos and things like that too. But any ideas you have, much appreciated. And yeah, obviously key part is not just how you get to the station, but it's then how you get to your last mile or last several miles.
Right. Okay, thanks.
But it's good to hear you're already on T Alert, which is good. Yeah, because I think I've seen that, but because I'm relatively local. But yeah, that's right. So Franny.
Yeah, hi. That's a note to self to look into T-Alert. When people arrive in Acton on the train, they often don't know what to do. So that's similar to Felicia, I think, well, signage and communication with the people like Felicia, but around here, would be really useful. It's a little timing bad because we haven't started our rail shuttle up yet, or our Cross Acton Transit, the CAT bus. But before the pandemic, the rail shuttle was taking people to businesses in Littleton, Westford from the Littleton station, and to various locations in Acton from South Acton station. But when people arrive, they don't know that those exist. Also, they don't understand that there's a dispatcher, and it's possible that if they arrive and they need to go somewhere and there's no fixed route, they could call the dispatcher and see if there's a trip that day. So all that information. And so what I would hope is that the LRTA and the Crosstown Connect and the South Acton staff could meet together and talk about ways to let riders get all this information of what the services are in our town. that, so often I hear people say, well, you can get there, but there's no transportation. They're just assuming. But here we are, been developing local last mile, first mile solutions. But yeah, so getting that communication and getting everybody on the same page with the planning would be very useful around here.
So obviously I can't force them to talk to each other, but I can certainly help.
Right. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, actually, the one thing I didn't mention in the previous discussion is the other thing, is on-train announcements as well. We're modernizing the kind of announcement system, basically. Hasn't fully rolled out yet, and that's been a bit of the drag on being able to do some of this, but that should be fully out by the spring, I believe. Again, no commitments, but the intent then is to leverage that to just change protocols of how things are announced, and perhaps give a lot more information that's stop specific than we do at the moment. So that's another option. So it doesn't obviously have to be written, and obviously it has accessibility issues anyway. So could equally be verbal or through whatever other format we can find.
Yeah, I think accessibility, attention, meeting with MBTA people about accessibility issues, more important along the line, say in Lincoln, where they're not accessible at all. But now, luckily we are, but we have a new property right next to our train station, which some conversation has happened with MBTA about. And I'm just going to throw in, even though it's not about bus to rail, reattaching or making formal the walking path along this train track. I've always been told, oh, just talk to the MBTA about that. I remember talking to Joe Nolan about it years ago. Ever since we built the station, it's sort of been closed off, so people can't do that, but there's no sidewalk on the parallel road. And so it allows people to walk west from the station safely. If the MBTA would agree with Acton to maybe have a little fenced path along there, something like that. So started.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to specifics before my time, I'm afraid, but typically we have a lot of issues with people next to the right of way, our right of way, that is. So we don't like to do a lot of it, and we've had a lot of incidents recently that have caused safety concerns. But provided we could find funding for some fencing, then that would make a lot of sense. So
I would just throw in that, Franny, if you want to have help convening that conversation, that's something that we'd be happy to help out with as well. So I'd be happy to talk to you about that offline.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And Susan, I think, or you.
Thank you again. So yeah, I had a couple questions for you. I'm wondering, what is the current timeline right now for regional rail towards getting to more of that higher frequency model? And then what is a timeline or plan for making all the stations ADA accessible? And then lastly, in regards to infrastructure improvements, I'm also wondering about some aesthetics. I think it's definitely very important for the signage and the accessibility, absolutely. But if you take a station, say like Waverly, for example, which I happen to go by quite often, it's like you're staring down into a dark, crumbly abyss, and I just wonder if, if with infrastructure improvements, if just kind of an overall enhancement might be on the horizon. Thank you.
So I'll describe the things we're looking at. So that one's a relatively clear one, which was we had a STARS, what we call station brightening program, which was to take the it wasn't that low cost, but anyway, relatively low cost approach of just painting, fixing spalling, and just generally making things more inviting. Fortunately, that is still, it was temporary. It was funded for downtown stations, and it only reached a relatively small portion. Hasn't reached all of the network yet. That is up for a bit more funding this year, but it will not be massive. I know that. But the issue, which you're now getting to for everything else, and I guess the other thing I should talk about is service levels. Service levels, as Jeff has described, we're all in a slightly wait and see attitude and react. I think the public processes, we put in a clock face based schedule, and that has given us much more efficient use of equipment. It's actually brought some of our costs down to some degree, and we utilize that to deliver higher level of service for the same overall cost. But we're just seeing ridership come back in very different ways across the lines, and we're trying to be flexible to respond to that. But that does mean it's a bit chicken and egg. So for some of the lines, it is hard to know. Because I'll give a good example. We increased the Beverly service just to 30-minute headways, and actually effectively did a test implementation of urban rail, not the full 15-minute frequency, which we're long-term aiming for, but using existing equipment and everything else. And it did drive up ridership. It was pretty clear, even during pandemic. So we're aware of that. It's now just a matter of funding and trying to target those service increases at areas we think are growing. I guess the other one would be the Worcester line, where, I mean, we sort of semi-understand the issue, but it is one of the weakest compared to where it used to be, in the kind of 30% range, whereas you've got now the route up to Newburyport, Rockport, which is averaging 60 to 70%. Some of that may have been driven by the extra boost around Salem with Halloween, but and being more popular this year perhaps than other years, but it seems to be continuing. So it's long answer, but it's proving very hard to forecast at the moment. We are doing an effort to try and do that. So we're not just going in blind. We're trying to monitor fairly live what's happening and refresh our forecasting. But till we have big numbers and sort of severe overcrowding, it'll be hard to justify adding too much more cost than we have right now, given we're not carrying what we were carrying before. But we're still, it's a very hard thing because we're trying to keep ahead of it. But I would then say the ambition is for minimal cost to do several small projects. And I think I did describe it on one of the slides in this pack. So I don't know if Sandy can go on a couple of slides. Let's see if it's in here still. Oh no, yeah, there we go. Maybe a bit further. One more. There we go. So it was just looking at the dark area running more frequency. Now, most of you that doesn't affect, but it is on the edge of several of your service areas. So we're looking at adding turn tracks, and I guess one example would be one at Riverside. That'd be interesting. And then one up at, well, I think we were going to call it 495, but anyway, one on the Fitchburg line, just the other side of Brandeis somewhere, because we have some double track up there. So we would have opportunities, should the demand start being there, or should there be funding from the state to do it, to run higher frequencies on those lines. But generally, we're trying to just get fixed properly, kind of hourly headways on all our lines, because some of them aren't quite working right now, because we're stuck with diesel equipment on an old network. So that's a very long answer, but as you might expect, it depends. It's a bit of demand and it's a bit of funding, but it's also just a bit of trying to prioritize between lines. So that's what I'll commit to on that, is just keep you updated and have an open discussion about it if you're planning more service on your end. So Judy?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this too, and inviting us into your conversation. I put in the chat the link to the accessibility study of the transit stations that CTA did in Chicago, where I just came from. You're probably aware of those, but I think it surprised them that they thought they were doing all wonderful things and being compliant with ADA standards, but really they weren't. And so the best way to ensure accessibility is have the voice and the usability and the pilot testing of people with disabilities all along the way. In early design, in launch, do a lot of usability testing. I think that's one way to help you feel more confident that accessibility, in a true sense, accessibility is important. And the other thing I wanted to say that you talked about municipalities and accessibility of paths of travel to stations. we just did a study with the Federal Highway Administration where we interviewed ADA coordinators around the country, and we learned that sometimes you could have the best station and the most accessible paths, walkways and signage at the station, but because the people don't have any way to get to the station to access the bus or train, that it didn't result in any improved ridership or wasn't any more accessible. So, work with municipalities as you're doing this to ensure that all around a station is also accessible and there's no paths of travel impediments to people accessing your service. I share that because we just learned it and it's in my head, and thinking about accessibility in a holistic way is really important. So thank you.
Yeah, so I should connect you to our accessibility group, but I'll give the example. Pre-COVID, we did a review of, I think it's I don't remember the exact number, but I think something like 15 or 19 stations on the rail network that have no accessibility, and one of them's already been mentioned. And we were looking at phased approaches to how we could actually improve each of those. And part of the effort was obviously a design company, but it was also actually taking a variety of actual users and taking them to the stations and having them as the sort of voice of what was wrong with this station. And they were starting the journey from wherever they would come from. So it was the walking issues, it was even just the access from some of the car parking, and then, bus drop off too. And then obviously getting to the train issue, what would potentially help. And back then, mini highs was still kind of considered an option. They're not particularly considered an option anymore. So but yeah, there's a lot of effort that is put into that analysis. Jeff, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of circle back and at least I can throw out one that is hopefully a really low hanging and really low cost solution. We talk about
I like those.
Certainly no concrete and steel with this one. One thing I think came out of one of these discussions was noticing that as the MBTA's website, because after all, that is one of the main channels where folks may go to get their transit planning information. And this is not a regional rail, commuter rail specific. I've noticed it. I've been poking around here while we're talking at all of the stations we connect at, but all of the some way to get the information, at least get a listing for the other carrier services. And part of this is, of course, also a determination of which other private carrier services should fall into this category. A municipal or RTA service, I think definitely should, or, anything that's open to the general public. But those aren't listed anywhere. So if you're looking at the commuter rail schedule, you look at the Waltham station page, there's a pretty good listing of the T-bus routes, but, our shuttle is not listed. If you're going to, if you're looking at North Station or Kendall Square, the Easy Ride shuttle is not listed there. You kind of have to, someone, if they're on the T's website, they have to really poke to like the PDF system map, which is probably buried further than the average traveler is going to get. I think they're great, but then I like staring at maps. So, but
they're super detailed, and even those, everybody that's non-MBTA is just kind of like gray in the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it is where I went to for my information for the immediate, neighbors, and then further out, obviously, I went to all your websites. But,
yeah. So that's a little thing, and it, like I said, it's it's obviously on the T's side for the overall website. I did even notice too, not making this about Alewife, but at Alewife, it's not even listing all of the MBTA's buses. Alewife, so there's definitely an issue there. But that's one of those little things that could hopefully be done. And I think also a slightly bigger issue, sort of a policy issue, would be determining which services qualify for inclusion where. Like I said, we've got three examples here of, municipal services, RTA services, and then, private TMA services, but open to the public. They're also, for example, even within our operation, at least our pre-COVID operation, there would be a few of our routes, which I would even argue don't get the same treatment as most of ours, because they were private and limited to certain people affiliated with certain companies. So, that's coming up with that policy of, that may affect where information about a service can be provided. It may even, impact actual on the ground implementation as to, which services and which carriers can have access to, sort of direct in-station facilities, depending on what type of service they are. A private closed door service shouldn't really necessarily get the same privileges as something that's open to the public. So yeah, I'll wrap that up there.
I think we struggle a little with that particular issue.
Yeah.
So we have thought about that issue about who gets priority where and everything. Our normal view is that we shouldn't be getting into that, and it should just be making it open to everybody because it's our facility for everybody. But we understand when it comes to true bus infrastructure, it's a bit different. So that's one issue. I'm trying to keep Uber and Lyft away is never going to happen just because they do what they want. But anyway, yeah, no, so completely understood. I think we'll think around that one because my interest is to get riders. So as far as I'm concerned, anybody else that's providing first mile, last mile is welcome, and we try and integrate as much as possible. There are a few issues around what can go on the MBTA website, but typically, as long as it's not sort of commercial, which we can't do, but if it's just informational, it's open to everybody, then it's just about facilities. I mean, we even do these sort of tour guide things where recommending places to go visit. So I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't apply the same principle. So I'll see if we can do more on that. And then the same issue would be, it wouldn't just be the website, it would hopefully be on train too, and maybe on the PA too. So all that good stuff.
And good. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, you guys at 120 ABC are doing some kind of a mapping exercise for your service area, and maybe I think maybe for Lexington and some of the other municipalities in the area. I don't know if you're personally involved with that, but is there anything that you can share about kind of any findings you've had or how it's going, trying to create a comprehensive transit map of the area?
It's something that we've done a lot of work with over a long time. Monica's been handling most of that. Susan actually is probably on some aspects of it more actually closer to it than I am, since I'm really focused on the day-to-day operations. But yeah, we sort of touch that world in a lot of different places. It also comes back to getting into GTFS data and real time and data and stuff like that. So which when you deal with the smaller operators like us is always I'm assuming that GTFS presents its own headaches for everybody. It's tremendously powerful, but also can be quite frustrating. But yeah, especially when you're dealing with a small operator, it gets to be the time demands on it are pretty high. So yeah, I mean, Susan, if there's anything you want to add on that, it's been sort of an ongoing long-term project for us.
Yeah, well, actually, I really look forward to sharing what they've come up with so far that I'm actually really excited about. And one of the things leads to kind of an overall suggestion, if I may. So regarding transit maps, because I do love maps, and I realize most of us on this call are probably predisposed to really loving maps of all kinds, especially transit ones. But the neat thing about what the council has done for us, and they're using Story Map, and they put basically all the transit lines, into this map where you can look at them and then you can click on, each one and then see what it is, right? Now, and the thing I've wondered about with the MBTA, when you look, there's that system map that exists, I believe, only as a PDF, and it's fantastic because it has, I think, pretty much everything, even down to like Amtrak and what have you. And so if there was a way that that could be more digital, where people could then click on it and see what is it, because right now, if you go to an MBTA service, let's say a particular bus line, when I want to go to the map part to see like maybe, okay, where exactly is my station? When I do that, I only get the one route. I then don't see when I go into that setting, how does this connect with other things? And one of the things I've realized is that when I go to this overall system map, sometimes I see connections that don't necessarily come up if, say, I'm just using like Google Transit or certainly the MBTA's transit planner. And so I actually think, and I'm trying to decide, okay, are we all just, map nerds? But I do feel if there was something more digital and user friendly where you could see the whole system and then just be able to click on it and then get the more detailed information. I think that could be useful not only for rail, but for bus service and everything else.
Yeah, no, I'm slightly surprised myself that we haven't quite got there, though I think there may be an issue of not wanting to repeat what Google's doing, though they aren't doing it as well as we'd like.
Yeah, but you do have no place where you really
see
see everything. You know what I mean? Where you
I
can
know
really
exactly
see
what you
like where
mean,
there's
yeah.
connections. Yeah.
Other than the PDF, yeah, which
Mhm.
of course has its issues because it's just static.
Mhm.
And you don't have that benefit of being able to hyperlink to schedules either. Yeah, no, that's good. I don't know whether there's a project on that because I know we've got lots of ideas about what we want to do to make it more interactive. Some of it might be waiting for bus network redesign, and I don't know if Caroline's going to say anything about it, but she's been using software that does a lot of that, but it's purely on bus, but it does show some of the station connections for their kind of trialing of the various service permutations and routes that are out for discussion right now under the MBTA bus side of things. So I see that technology and that particular provider could be easily repurposed for this. So that's just an example. I mean, we all know it exists. It's out there. We get to play with StoryMap once in a while, and it's good for visualizing data and parking and demand and TOD and walk sheds and stuff like that. But yeah, it would be good to see. So yeah, I'll certainly take that back and see what the plans are, and if I hear anything, I'll report back. So I'll do that as an action. Because it's a good idea, obviously. Okay, Jeff again.
Let me click on the right button so I can start talking. Just another one, I think there was a brief mention earlier of layover points
Yes.
for service operators and vehicle and operator layover. And again, this is, I feel like most of my points, unless that aren't specific to a single station, and I'm not going to go into great detail with Waltham because what's working there is working for now, and hopefully, there's exciting things to come in the future along that line.
Sure, no, definitely. But could you describe what you mean by what's working? So, are you doing a deal currently with the city, city?
Yeah, we have access to the curb space in the same stop area with the MBTA buses that serve the station. Certainly, in terms of access to the inbound commuter rail platform, that stop is unlikely to. There's really nothing short of a major reconstruction of everything along the tracks that would bring it any closer. It's not so convenient to the outbound platform, but that's more of a function of just how the station is laid out. It's again, that's transitioning from even medium scale to large scale reconstruction. So we don't have any issues. We have no issues really in terms of like securing curb space to stop there. We've been using it for over 20, probably close to 25 years. And the city doesn't get, both the city and T-bus ops are quite used to us being there, and it's everyone's playing nicely in the sandbox. So we're happy from that perspective. we've tried to do some informational stuff, like, for example, the shuttle page for our Waltham Route B has both, a schematic map, even a video done of walking to and from the platform to where the shuttle stop is, just because that one, especially the outbound platform's a little far away, or it's not really far away, but it's not necessarily obvious when you first look at the station from the shuttle stop. So we've done little things like that to try and.
Do you have any kind of data of how that's worked for you? Because we're thinking of doing that everywhere, to the extent we can.
I'll ask around. I don't think that we really do, but it's something that we did for all three of our connection points, Waltham Center, Alewife, and Newton Highlands, where we just created these little videos when we did our last website upgrade, so that folks could see what the for folks that don't necessarily follow when they look at a map, they gave them an alternate way of viewing that information and seeing what they need to do when they make the connection. But yeah, I mean, that's why I haven't talked a lot about Waltham, just because it's like there are some ways it could certainly be better, but that's a much bigger picture than I think what we're talking about in a lot of ways here. But my point about the layovers, though, is just that's becoming an increasing issue at all of the stations where we operate, and I'm sure others are having it as well. That given the impact of traffic conditions, we have to put so much buffer at times into our operations to keep our vehicles on schedule. And particularly like at Alewife, has gotten to the point where there is just no space for private operators to have any kind of layover. And I don't want to get into a situation where we literally have shuttle vehicles circling a station, trying to run off their time before their departure, because there's just, they can't stay at the station because somebody else has got to use the curb and there's no alternate space nearby. So, hopefully, in terms of regional rail, a lot of the stations probably do have space, even if it's as simple as, a vehicle might not be able to wait right at the boarding drop-off location, but there's probably some space in the back of the lot, especially if the lots aren't being used to 100% capacity, or at least a vehicle could lay over, while they're waiting time, either for that train connection to arrive, or just, lay over for scheduled reliability. So that's something important to keep in mind. And it's given how dense an area is, both in terms of development and space, and also which tends to tie into your traffic density, it's becoming a bigger and bigger challenge for us, and probably for other operators. And if there's any way for locating, one of those other issues that's become is locating relief facilities for operators. It happens for us too.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that last time. Yeah, now you mentioned that, I was quite familiar. Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of our stations, of course, don't have that kind of facility. But one thing we've thought about is partnering with cities where there's other facilities. But how much, and I don't know, this is getting the minutiae a bit, but it is about where you would put that layover. How much use sort of during the layover is it for actually gathering passengers, given our climate? And how much of it is just more operational, so we could put it somewhere slightly further away and it would still be functionally useful, and maybe co-located with bathroom facilities or whatever, provided by something else. But so in other words, how much, because it's fairly high price real estate, that drop-off curve, but the maybe something nearby or some deals we could do with cities would help.
Yeah, I would say, and Sandy, thanks for encouraging us to discuss this.
But actually, it does drive decision making, that particular point.
Absolutely. For us, for the most part, I also think that the circumstances might be slightly different at a regional rail station, depending on the frequency of the regional rail service versus a subway rapid transit station, where we're, in those, all circumstances, our shuttles are leaving on a set schedule. But when it's connecting to, commuter rail, we obviously have an idea of when that train's going to arrive based on the timetable. We don't have that for the red line or the green line. It's just, we just got to, we pick a departure time and and we, the shuttle goes on that. Certainly for those cases, about 5 minutes max is really all we're looking at. So if we're earlier than that, a regional rail, a Waltham situation right now, with the current Fitchburg schedule, we kind of offer that we meet the trains in both directions, although in one direction, that's much longer wait for someone doing the train to shuttle connection. We're currently sort of orienting towards timing for folks coming out of the city to Waltham. And they have the more favored connection, and folks coming from the west have the less favored. That's a scenario where we might wait a little bit. We might want to have the bus on the curb, at the pickup stop a little bit longer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that long. In terms of how much additional layover time, it's thinking from our system and the areas we serve. We budget a lot more schedule padding going in and out of Alewife, or certainly we traditionally did pre-pandemic, because we could lose 15-20 minutes. You could spend 50% of your vehicle's travel time from the Waltham Lexington area into Alewife would be spent on that last half a mile to mile and a half trying to get into the station. So just using it as an illustration of how much time we can have to factor in. That could lead, it frequently leads to a shuttle needing to burn off anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes in the Alewife station vicinity somewhere. So, if a layover area, again, doesn't have to be right at the station, but it should be accessible within a very short drive. Right now, a lot of the operators are finding a layover in that area, but it's 5 to 8 minutes travel time each way to get to and from the layover. So it really presents them with a paradox. If they have 15 minutes, they don't have enough time to go to the layover, but that might be too long because somebody else is scheduled to use the curb, so they can't stay there. So that's just like an illustration of how that's coming into becoming a scheduling and operational challenge for us.
Okay, understood.
So I do want to say it is 11 o'clock, and I think many of us probably have to go. This has been a great discussion, and I do want to continue it. Matt, if we can go to the slide about the next coffee chat. But again, thank you to Alistair and to Caroline, who just had to leave, for taking the time to listen to all of this. We do have several more coffee chats upcoming, one on Monday about closing gaps in the transit network, kind of more broadly, for this very specific discussion. We're sponsoring one about confronting shortfalls in driver recruitment. I think that some of the many transit operators are facing right now. The following week, November 17th, one on transit recovery from COVID-19 in December. And then Alistair and I have talked about doing a second regional rail station access coffee chat, probably geared more toward municipalities and potentially some other policy folks and nonprofit folks. And we'll get back to you soon about timing on that. Probably won't be for a while. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Alistair.
Yeah, that probably won't be for a while. And I guess the final point, we never really, I didn't know where the hour went, but anyway. So thank you, everybody. But I did also want to say we're in the early stages, as I say, of a funding program. Again, very small amounts. So this will help guide some of that. And I'll report back once I know more about it. That will be under MassDOT. And again, that could be potentially for obviously you guys to access, but it'll also be the cities as well, depending what it is, or for us providing facilities for you. So there's certainly interest in this topic, and it is a bit of a hot topic, which is good.
And thank you. And we will continue the discussion.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.